A helpless grizzly cub lay crying in the snow. 3 wolves circled. Then out of nowhere, a lone bobcat stepped in front of the cub bleeding. Alone but unafraid. What he did next shocked the entire forest. The sky was gray and heavy like it was holding its breath, and the forest below was quiet as if even the trees were listening to something deep in the ground. And far away in the middle of Pinehull Forest a young bobcat named Riven moved silently through the snow, his belly aching with hunger and his paws frozen from the cold, but he kept walking because stopping meant weakness and weakness meant death. He had not eaten in 2 days, and every step felt heavier than the last. He had tracked a rabbit trail through the thicket thinking it might lead him to food, but instead it led him to something else, something strange, something that made him stop and lift his head. The sound came again, soft and thin like a broken bird call, but it was not a bird, it was a cry, a baby cry, and it came from just beyond the trees near the edge of a fallen log where the snow gathered in thick mounds and shadows clung to the ground. Riven lowered himself and crept forward, his ears perked, his nose twitching with the cold, and when he reached the clearing he saw it, and it made him freeze. A grizzly bear cub was lying on its side beside the log, its fur dusted with frost and its tiny paws curled in close to its belly. It looked weak and cold and scared, its little nose moving as it breathed fast and shallow, its eyes flicking around the forest like it was searching for something that never came. Riven should have walked away right then and there. He should have turned and disappeared into the woods before the cub's mother returned, but something held him in place. Maybe it was the look in the cub's eyes, maybe it was the quiet way it cried like it had already given up. Riven stepped closer, the snow crunching softly under his paws. The cub looked up at him, and for a moment they just stared at each other. No growls, no movement, no fear, just 2 creatures alone in the wild trying to understand what came next. Then the wind shifted and Riven smelled something new, something sharp, something dangerous. He turned his head fast, ears up, nose high, and that was when he saw them. 3 wolves stepped out of the trees, their fur thick and gray, their eyes locked onto the grizzly cub. They moved like shadows, swift and low. One of them let out a low growl, and the other 2 followed, spreading out to flank the log. Riven moved without thinking, placing himself between the cub and the wolves, his back arched, his fur standing high, his teeth bared. He was smaller, much smaller, and alone, but he did not back down. The lead wolf took a step forward, testing him. Riven hissed and struck the ground with his paw. The snow puffed up around him, and still he did not move back. The wolves were confused. A bobcat was defending a bear cub. It made no sense, but it did not matter. They were hungry, and this was prey. The first wolf lunged, teeth snapping. Riven dodged and swiped hard across its snout, a quick slash that drew blood. The wolf yelped and pulled back. The others circled tighter, moving fast. Riven spun and clawed and bit. Every time one came near he lashed out, his body moving like fire. The cub cried behind him, a soft sound almost lost in the noise of the fight. Riven took a bite to the side, a claw to his leg, but he kept going. He could not stop, he would not let them pass. He darted under a wolf's belly and struck its leg, then leapt away just before teeth caught his tail. He was bleeding now, panting, his vision blurry, but the wolves were tiring too. This was not the easy kill they expected. Suddenly the air changed again, and this time the forest went completely silent. Not even the wind moved, and then came the roar. It was not a sound, it was a force, a wall of fury that crashed through the trees and stopped the wolves cold. And from the ridge above the clearing a massive figure appeared, her fur like a wall of earth, her eyes burning with rage, her steps shaking the snow off the ground. The grizzly mother had returned. She charged down the hill faster than anything that size should be able to move. The wolves turned and ran, no fight left in them. They knew they had no chance against her, not now, not after what they had done or tried to do. She reached the clearing in seconds, her breathing heavy, her eyes scanning, and then she saw her cub still alive, still shaking, and beside him the bobcat standing broken and bleeding but tall and unafraid. Riven did not move, he could not, his legs shook and his chest burned, but he stood firm. He watched as the mother sniffed her cub, then sniffed the air around him, and then slowly turned her huge head toward the bobcat. Their eyes met and Riven waited for the end. He was too weak to run, too tired to fight, but the bear did not growl, she did not roar, instead she just stared, and in that stare there was something strange, something ancient, something soft. She lowered her head just slightly and then nudged her cub forward. The little bear looked back at Riven for a moment before waddling into the snow beside its mother, and the two disappeared into the woods together, leaving the bobcat alone in the clearing surrounded by blood and silence and snow. Riven collapsed in the snow, his breath rising in small clouds, his body aching but his heart steady. He did not know why he had stayed or what would happen next, but for that one day in the heart of a frozen forest a bobcat had done something no one would believe. He had saved a grizzly cub. And somewhere deep inside the woods the wild remembered. Riven lay in the snow for a long time, his chest rising and falling slowly, his breath puffing in front of his face like fading ghosts. The pain in his side was sharp and hot, but he stayed still, letting the cold numb his wounds and the quiet steady his heart. The sky above him had started to clear and streaks of light peeked through the branches high above, warming patches of snow around his paws. He had defended the cub and somehow survived, and now he was alone again, just as he had always been. He had no pack, no family, no home, just the forest and his instincts, but something inside him felt different now, like he had crossed an invisible line. Something had changed, and he was not sure what. His muscles ached as he stood. He limped toward the edge of the clearing, his paws dragging in the snow behind him. He knew he needed to find shelter and rest before the cold claimed him, but as he turned toward the deep woods something stopped him. Small tracks just ahead in the snow, fresh and scattered but clear. They belonged to the grizzly cub and its mother. They had passed through here only minutes ago, and without thinking Riven began to follow them. Each step hurt, but he moved anyway, drawn by a strange pull that he could not explain. Maybe it was curiosity or instinct, or maybe it was something else, something softer, something deeper. The tracks led through a frozen ravine and past a half-frozen stream where ice cracked with every gust of wind. The forest was quieter here, heavier, like it was holding something sacred. Riven paused to drink from a shallow pool and winced as cold water touched his wounded lip. The bobcat's thoughts wandered back to the moment the bear had stared at him, not with anger but with something close to respect. It had meant something, he knew it, but he did not understand what, and that feeling kept him moving. Farther along the trail he came to a clearing where the snow had been disturbed. Large prints circled a mound of leaves, and Riven saw a den entrance dug deep into the base of a hill. It was hidden well, and he would have missed it if not for the scent in the air. The grizzly cub was inside. Riven stopped just short of the den, his ears up, his eyes wide. He had no plan, no reason to be here, but his paws would not let him leave. He sat in the snow watching the entrance, listening to the faint sounds of breathing from within. Then the mother bear appeared from behind a tree, her steps slow and deliberate, her eyes locked on him. Riven did not move. He was not here to fight. He lowered his head slightly, a sign of peace, and waited. The bear came closer, towering over him, her breath warm in the cold air, her body casting a long shadow on the snow. Riven stayed still, heart thudding. She sniffed the ground near him, then sniffed him directly, her nose brushing his fur. She turned back toward the den, then paused and looked at him again, her gaze softer, now more thoughtful. Then she stepped aside, revealing the den entrance once more, and walked inside, disappearing into the shadows. Riven blinked slowly, unsure what had just happened. Was that permission? Was he being allowed near? Was that even possible? He stepped forward carefully, slowly placing each paw in the snow without sound, and moved closer to the edge of the den. He did not enter, but he curled beside the entrance where the ground was dry and the wind could not reach him, and for the first time in many nights he closed his eyes without fear. The next morning was brighter, the sky a pale blue, and birds chirped quietly from the branches above. Riven stirred and stretched his sore limbs, and then he saw it. The grizzly cub was sitting just outside the den, watching him with wide, curious eyes. The cub did not growl or cry, it simply watched, then stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, until it was only a few paces away, and sat down, its little ears twitching. Riven stayed still, unsure of what to do, but the cub looked calm and content, and soon it lay on its side and began rolling in the snow like it wanted to play. Riven tilted his head, and for the first time in a long time he felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with sunlight. It was strange and unfamiliar but welcome. The mother bear appeared again, and she did not chase him away. She only watched, then returned to the den as if she accepted his presence, as if she knew what he had done. Days passed and Riven did not leave. He hunted alone and returned with small catches. He drank from the stream nearby and slept beside the den, never too close, never too far. The cub would come out and sit with him, and sometimes they would chase snowflakes together or curl near each other for warmth. It was a bond that made no sense, a bobcat and a grizzly sharing space and time and silence, but somehow in the wild where rules were hard and life was harder it worked. Not everything had to be explained, some things just were. But peace in the forest never lasted long. One morning Riven woke to a strange scent in the wind, not wolf, not bear, not anything from the woods. This scent was sharp and bitter and burned his nose, and then he heard it, the crunch of boots in snow. Humans. They were nearby, and they were coming this way. Riven stood up quickly, his ears turning side to side and his eyes locked toward the sound. It was close, too close. Boots were not quiet, and neither were the men wearing them. The snow muffled some of their movement, but not enough. The air was still and their presence was loud, heavy, unnatural. They were heading toward the den, toward the mother bear and her cub. The bobcat's muscles tensed and every part of him screamed to run, but he did not. Instead he turned toward the ridge and climbed it fast, using his claws to pull himself up the rocks and thick ice until he could see them. Two men dressed in dark forest gear moved between the trees, each one carrying a rifle and large packs on their backs. They walked with purpose, not wandering, not lost. They were tracking something, and Riven knew what it was. The cub's prints were still visible in the snow from the days before, and even though the wind had softened them, the signs were there if someone knew what to look for, and these men clearly did. The bobcat paced along the ridge, unsure of what to do. He could run, warn the bear, risk being seen, or he could disappear and pretend none of this mattered. But as he looked back toward the den, entranced, the memory of the cub rolling in the snow beside him filled his mind, and with that one memory the choice was made. He raced down the hill and darted through the brush, reaching the base of the hill in moments. He let out a growl, not loud but sharp, then ran a few steps up the path before turning and growling again. He was calling the bear, not with words but with urgency. The mother grizzly emerged, her huge body filling the den, entrance, her nose up and alert, her eyes meeting Riven's with instant understanding. He growled once more and pointed his head toward the trees. She moved quickly but without panic. She grunted, and the cub followed close behind. The two disappeared into the thickest part of the woods through a hidden path Riven had once used himself long ago. Then the bobcat turned back toward the clearing and waited. The men arrived less than a minute later, rifles up, eyes scanning. They were ready for anything, or so they thought. What they saw instead was a single bobcat standing in the snow, staring straight at them, not afraid, not moving. One of the men raised his rifle, but the other held up a hand. Wait, he said, that's not it, that's not what we're tracking. Still the first man aimed his rifle steady and cold, and Riven stood still, heart pounding, not from fear but from defiance. He was not prey, not today. The men moved on, finally deciding the bear had moved on. They followed the trail that led away from the den, heading in the wrong direction, and Riven watched until their forms disappeared behind the trees. He waited until the forest was silent again, then turned and padded toward the hidden path the bear had taken. He followed their scent just to make sure they were safe, and when he found them a few minutes later, the cub let out a happy sound and ran to him, brushing his side with its soft little body. The mother bear stood tall nearby, her eyes calm but alert, her massive body between them and the world. She looked at Riven and then did something no wild bear usually did. She lowered her head and let out a soft rumble, almost like a greeting, not a warning, not a threat, something else, something rare. Riven sat beside the cub, and for the rest of that day they stayed together, the forest wide and quiet around them, snow falling gently from above like the sky was blessing their bond. But Riven knew it could not last forever. He was a bobcat and she was a bear. Their paths were never meant to stay crossed for long, and the forest, though beautiful, was not kind to those who forgot their nature. The next morning came bright and cold, the sky open and blue and the forest full of bird calls and distant rustles. Riven woke to find the cub asleep beside him, the bear resting nearby, but something inside him told him it was time. He stood and walked a few steps away, then looked back. The cub opened its eyes and watched him, and the mother bear too stood and watched, and for a moment none of them moved. Then Riven turned and walked into the forest, not fast, not slow, just steady, the way the wild always moved, not with goodbyes but with silence. He did not stop or look back, though every part of him wanted to. He just walked, letting the wind carry his scent away, letting the forest take him back as one of its own. Seasons changed and snow melted and new life filled the woods again. Riven grew stronger and wiser, his scars fading into his fur, his steps quieter than ever. He hunted with precision and slept in high caves and deep hollows, and always he listened for the sounds of humans. He never saw the cub again, but sometimes when he walked by the river he would find prints bigger than his own near the water's edge, or deep scratch marks on the trees, signs that the bear had grown strong, that it had survived. And in those moments Riven would stop and sit and listen to the wind and remember the day he made a choice that went against everything the wild had taught him. To defend instead of run, to protect instead of hide, to trust instead of fear. That day a bobcat became more than just a shadow in the trees. He became a story passed in silence from tree to stream to cave to sky, a story the forest remembered even if no creature ever spoke of it. Because sometimes the wild does not need words to keep its legends alive. It only needs one moment of courage, one act of unexpected loyalty, one bond that should not exist but somehow does. And so in the heart of Pinehull Forest, where snow still falls and silence still rules, if you ever see a trail of prints side by side, a small set and a larger one walking close together, remember this story. Remember the day a bobcat defended a grizzly cub and changed the wild forever.